Welcome to the Doubly Delicious allotment. As you can see, when we started this allotment it was quite overgrown and lots to be done. We've been documenting our journey as we progress. This is the first edition of where we're at up to this point before the growing season begins next spring. Day 1 started with having to clear all of the old plots from the flowers and weeds. The previous plot owners had been growing lots of flowers, which may have looked beautiful at one point but had unfortunately been neglected. As you can see, it's very overgrown at this point. We were there for about 4 hours in total on the first day, just clearing half the ground ready to begin the next session. There was lots of weeds in the ground and amongst the flowers, which we couldn't really see at first. Unfortunately, it seems as though a lot of rubbish had also been left in the soil at this point. It was very disappointing to see how much plastic there was. The plastic sheeting may once have kept down some of the weeds, but unfortunately it started to degrade and we had to rip everything up without trying to ruin the soil. You can see here Jack having to rip up all of that weed, bury it and dispose of it. Unfortunately, it started to come apart and it was really difficult to deal with. This next part was painful, but unfortunately it was necessary. We use a lot of nasturtiums in the restaurant. Both the leaves and flowers give a great flavour, but we had to start from zero, so we had to get all of this removed from the giant bed as they had really started to take over. When we first saw the plot, it was pretty much all you could see on there. They'd also started to grow into neighbouring plots, which we couldn't have. This next section of day 1 was a bit repetitive. As you can see from this footage, it was pretty much the same thing for quite a while. Jack was digging over the soil to remove the weeds and hopefully dig up the roots. I then went over with the rake to try and make sure that I could catch any weeds and their roots and pile it up before we burnt them. Obviously we can't compost the weeds because we will end up with the seeds back in the compost, and the same problem again next growing season. For anybody watching that's interested in allotment, you should contact the Lichfield Allotment Society. There is quite a big waiting list as allotments are really popular at the moment. We had to wait for about 18 months, although it might have been a bit sooner if we hadn't missed an email last March. The allotments are only £50 for a full plot for the growing season, so pretty good value really. This brings us to the end of the first day, so here's a finished photo and then a comparison of the start of the day compared to the end of the day. We'd like to think we made a lot of progress on this first day. However, our backs were not in the greatest position afterwards, so we had to have a couple of light days following this. Day 2 on the plot, and we wanted to make sure we got this barrier or fence in place to separate us from the plot behind. This used to be one big plot, so it was all open, and we wanted to create that little bit of separation between us and them. We wanted to use natural materials wherever we could on the plot. Anybody that's been to Doubly Delicious will know that we're very into sustainability and making sure we look after the environment. So we didn't want to use plastic netting if possible. We've got some basic fence posts that we hammered in the day before. We then got some jute netting, very cheap and available from Amazon, that we used to tie the two end posts together, and then obviously we had the posts in between for the extra support. This is what the finished look looks like. You might be able to see we also added a little bit of a baseboard at the bottom just for that finishing effect. We used leftover wood that we found on the plot for this. Once our backs had recovered, day 3 was pretty much the same as day 1, sorting out the second half of the plot, having to remove again all the weeds and the plants. This took a long time as a lot of the plants were either really old, very rotten, or were just roots with very deep roots. The rhubarb was perhaps the worst of the offenders. The roots were at least 4 foot deep and were very rotten and very spread out. This alone took us well over an hour to get rid of all of the rhubarb. As much as I love it, it's probably put me off planting any future rhubarb, having seen the damage that it's done to us. We managed to get this very useful battery-powered electric rotavator from Ryobi. It was a great tool and was very useful in helping us to break up the ground ready for planting later on. Obviously we're not at that point for a while yet, but it's great to start preparing the ground, and we saw some real progress at the end of this day. This shot here shows what the finished plot was like at the end of the clearing process. There were some raised beds left on the plot that we've decided to make use of rather than throw away. The giant raised bed is too heavy to move, so that will be staying in position. We then thought it would make sense to keep all the other raised plots together, so we've laid them out roughly where we think we're going to have them. And again, this is the finished photo at the end of these days. Next up, Jack wanted to give the raised beds a lick of paint. We used a fairly cheap Wicks paint that was suitable for outdoor fences. It took a few coats, but it did a decent job at covering them up. This added that little bit of protection from the elements and smartened them up a little bit. The colour was charcoal, although it came out blue at first. We have since been back and confirmed that it is a charcoal colour once it's dried. Whilst Jack was doing that, I laid out where the paths and beds are going to be that we're going to grow in next spring. We also started to have a look around the plot and see what we could make use of, if possible. This shot here just shows off those raised beds that have been painted, as well as the paths and beds that we've put in place. And then the most recent thing that we've done is a little bit of planting. We can't plant much because of the time of year, but we wanted to make a start to make us feel like we'd made some progress on the plot. This is us putting in some gooseberry bushes, 6 white and 6 red. Dobbies won't thank us because we cleared them out of all of their plants yesterday. And here are those other 6 going into the other end of the plot. Just to finish off, we've put in 70 garlic plants ready to harvest next year. And that pretty much brings us to the end of this first episode. Next, here's a recap of what the plot now looks like with the beds put in place and the path put in place. Next, we're hoping to wood chip these.